Thousands of people end up on the streets because of a few. Kyle is one of them, so he sneaks into a TV station disguised as a delivery guy carrying 2 boxes. This is where they manipulate thousands of people. Kyle points a gun at the show's host, Lee, and fires into the air. Everyone screams in fear. Patty, the producer, asks to turn off the cameras, but the delivery man points at Lee, demanding they turn them back on. Patty hesitates, but Kyle grabs Lee, threatening to shoot if they don't obey. Patty gives in, and Kyle, with a gun aimed at Lee, is now live on air. Kyle tells Lee to choose one of the boxes, and inside, he finds a vest full of explosives. Everyone is trapped. Patty watches from the control room and tries to figure out a way to save Lee, who's on the brink of death, while Kyle finds a way to achieve his goal and escape without getting caught. Kyle tells Lee to put the vest on, and if he refuses, he will blow everything up. Lee, terrified, tells Patty he feels like he's having a heart attack, but Kyle says it's just fear. Meanwhile, the police start arriving. Kyle, shaking, turns to the cameras and pulls out a piece of paper saying he's not a criminal. The real criminals are people like Lee, who steal from others and face no consequences. Wall Street is the one stealing the country. They control the media and information, but Kyle says that won't happen today. He blames Ibis Clear Capital for the sudden crash in value caused by a calculation error in their computer system. He also blames Lee for losing his money, since he said investing in that company was safe. Lee tries to defend himself, saying he never said that. At the Ibis headquarters, Diane, the head of public relations, was waiting to be interviewed by Lee when she realized that this scandal would affect Ibis. Kyle demands that the footage be shown where Lee made the statement. He even remembers the date. Patty tells her assistant to find the tape. When they air it, Lee is seen saying that investing in Ibis Clear Capital is better than any other option. Seeing this, Lee knows he's in trouble. Kyle reveals that he invested $60,000 in Ibis. Lee offers to pay him back, saying $60,000 is nothing to him. But to Kyle, it's not enough. He wants $800 million, which vanished into thin air overnight. The boy is very upset about losing his life savings and says he is not there to get paid. He is determined to talk about what happened. Police Captain Powell calls Patty, asking him to distract Kyle while they devise a plan. Through Lee's headset, Patty tells him to calm Kyle, who has now locked the studio doors. Lee tries to reassure him, saying that Canby, the Ibis CEO, regrets the situation and that it was all a mistake. Kyle gets angry and accuses Lee of just reading a script and not caring about what happened to his money. The police have now identified Kyle, and because he doesn't have a criminal record, they sent officers to his house. Then, the police put the voice of a negotiator on the loudspeakers, but Kyle shoots into the air and clarifies that he will not talk to anyone but the president of Ibis. Patty notices that Diane Lester is missing and doesn't know where Canby is. The police are studying the building's plans and the way to enter and evacuate people. At the Ibis offices, Ron Sprecher, an executive producer of Money Monster, tries to enter, but security does not let him pass. Diane decides to go downstairs to talk to Ron and give them some answers about what happened. In the studio, police realize the only way to take out Kyle without being seen is from the catwalk above. They plan to position a sharpshooter, but first, they must disable the bomb by shooting the controller on Lee's side. However, at that angle, they will hit a kidney, and Lee could bleed out before reaching an ambulance. Diane heads to the lobby to relay her message to Kyle through Ron, saying she'll do whatever it takes to make him drop the gun. She offers him $60,000 on top of the $60,000 Lee promised. But Kyle insists he just wants to know what happened to his money. And Diane admits they don't know why the system failed. Meanwhile, an Ibis employee contacts Canby, who's on a plane, and tells him the situation is spiraling out of control because Kyle is exposing their shady practices. Canby reassures him that Lee is an idiot and everything will be fine. Diane tells Kyle that the issue has also impacted their pension fund and savings, but Kyle refuses to feel sorry for them. Lee suggests that Diane should let her computer analyst speak if she doesn't know what happened. Now, Lee is curious about Diane's secrecy. Kyle gets angry and says he doesn't want to talk to a worker, but to Walt Canby. Diane repeats that he's on a plane. Then, Kyle, frustrated, shoots at the screen. Patty screams at Diane, saying Kyle did that because she couldn't give him any answers and that she needs to figure it out. She demands Diane to figure it out, reminding her that they're 25 meters from a bomb and their lives are at risk. Patty urges Lee to calm Kyle and negotiate a deal that benefits both sides. Kyle gives Lee 10 minutes to come up with a solution. Meanwhile, the police are entering the building and taking positions. When Diane returns to the office, she asks a colleague for a list of those involved in creating the IBIS investment algorithm. Afterward, she heads to the airport, having been informed that Walt is about to arrive. In the studio, the 10 minutes are almost over. Lee realizes they're on air, and millions of investors are watching. So, he makes a desperate plea, urging everyone to buy IBIS stock, not to make money, but to save his life. He believes that as people start buying, the algorithms will push the stock prices higher and higher. Lee begs for his life on camera, but there's no response. He realizes no one cares whether he lives or dies. The cops guarding Kyle's house see a girl come in. They interrogate her and discover that she is Kyle's girlfriend and that she is pregnant. Now all they have to do is put it on a screen so she can convince Kyle to surrender. Back at the studio, Kyle tells Lee that his call to buy IBIS stock hasn't worked out because people don't believe in him. Patty informs Lee that Kyle has a pregnant girlfriend. Then Kyle asks Lee if it hurts to see that he's not a big shot like he thought. Then they start talking about each other's flaws until Kyle points the gun at Lee, but Patty intervenes and says they need to calm down. At that moment, Kyle's girlfriend appears on the screen. Patty informs Lee that she's about to speak. But instead of calming Kyle down, Molly furiously lashes out at him for losing their money. She calls him a failure and tells him to kill himself, saying he's not a man, but a child. Kyle is left speechless. Lee tries to comfort him by offering him a drink. At the airport, Diane contacts one of the algorithm's creators living in Seoul. He tells her that he created a program that works, and what happened was a user error. He explains that his algorithm can't lose $800 million so quickly. Just then, her boss, Walt, arrives and greets her with a kiss, revealing they're having an affair. While helping him with his briefcase, Diane looks at his passport and realizes he's coming from South Africa, not Switzerland. Why would Walt lie about his location? In the studio, Kyle is desperately pacing back and forth. Lee tells Kyle that he has made a mistake, and Kyle asks him to give him a reason not to shoot the gun into his mouth. Lee tells him that he needs a plan and that he will help him. But Kyle worries that if he lets the employees go, he's as good as dead. Lee assures him that they'll find another way. Meanwhile, the cops inside the building are slowly approaching, and now they have quietly opened one of the doors that Kyle had closed. Inside the car, Walt tells Diane that he, as president of the company, must give a statement, just as she told him. She tells him she has already reserved a guarded place where they can call the press. In the studio, Lenny, the camera operator, tries to block Kyle's view by zooming in on the camera, while the police quietly pull his colleagues out. If Kyle turns around, they'll all be dead. Meanwhile, Diane calls Patty to inform him that Walt will speak and that they will be going to the federal building in 20 minutes. Powell's specialists inform him that the sharpshooter has an 80% chance of hitting Kyle without killing Lee. Patty gets a message from Diane, revealing that Walt wasn't in Geneva, but in South Africa. He asks the hackers to help him figure out why, and tells Lee, realizing that Walt has been lying. Bree, Patty's assistant, is outside and hears that the cops are about to shoot Lee and quickly tells Patty. She communicates this to Lee through the earpiece, warning him that he has only a few seconds to act. Without hesitation, Lee jumps on Kyle, preventing him from reaching the detonator, and warns him that they're going to shoot. That's when Lee realizes Kyle's only chance of survival is to leave the studio with him and see Walt together. Meanwhile, Patty is evacuated by the police against his will. Lee asks Kyle to trust him and use him as a shield to protect him from gunfire. They leave the studio, followed by Lenny, and board an elevator while Patty takes a van with a satellite connection. When they get out of the elevator, they are told that they are live again, and when they get out into the street, they see many police officers pointing at them and helicopters flying over them. Despite the police warnings, the streets fill with people supporting Kyle. Lee tells Kyle not to leave his side. That's when Kyle confesses that the vest doesn't have explosives, just sandbags. But Lee says they should keep going because the cops don't know that. Patty and Diane agree that Walt's explanation is false. He was the one who took out the $800 million, and Patty remembers that the word Mambo is repeated in Walt's messages. Upon investigation, they discover that Mambo is the name of a union leader who was involved in a miners' strike. But what does this have to do with the IBIS problem? Patty needs to talk to Lee, and the only way is for Ron to toss him a mic as they're walking. Thinking they're under attack, Kyle fires a shot. Lee tells him that he can stop there or keep going. Kyle starts walking again. Walt watches the news and sees that Lee is heading his way. He feels betrayed by Diane. She begs him to go on camera and explain what happened since all of New York knows he's in that building. But Walt tries to leave. That's when Kyle shows up on the verge of breaking down and stops him by pointing a gun at him. Lee covers the detonator on Kyle's vest with Walt's jacket and finally sits down to interview Walt in front of the cameras. The Money Monster show starts right there in the building's lobby. Walt keeps claiming it was all a system error, but Lee doesn't buy it. Patty already told him the story the hackers uncovered. Lee reveals that Walt used the $800 million to fund a fake strike at platinum mines in South Africa to drive down prices, but he didn't expect the union boss to refuse the bribe. Walt attempts to deny it, but Patty, filming from the van, displays a video of Walt arguing with the union leader earlier that morning. Kyle, wanting justice, asks Lee to take off his vest and put it on Walt. Kyle demands that he confess that he is a thief, but Walt insists that he has not stolen from anyone. He just did business. Finally, Kyle threatens to release the detonator button, and Walt, fearing his death, admits that he did wrong. Thousands of people watch him confess. Kyle, satisfied, says, "That's all I wanted to hear," and looks at Lee. At that moment, Lee sees what Kyle is about to do. Kyle releases the button and throws the detonator just as a bullet strikes his chest. In shock, Lee screams for an ambulance, but it's too late. Patty arrives at the hospital with Chinese food for Lee, and they listen to the news about Kyle's death, a 24-year-old delivery guy from Queens. You can see the pain on Lee's face. They also report that an investigation has been opened into Ibis Clear Capital for possible corruption. Then Patty tells Lee to find something interesting for next week's show, and they both smile.